Thanks again, everybody, for joining us tonight. We're extremely honored and happy to have Maccabi USA alumni and the Accidental Talmudist, Sal Litvak, with us tonight. But before we begin, I want to introduce tonight's moderator, Mike Zausmer. Mike is originally from Detroit, Michigan, and is a lifelong fan and competitor in golf. He played collegiately at Lafayette and now works in the marketing division and golf course design for Jack Nicklaus Companies. Mike was a member of the open golf team at the 2017 Maccabi Games, while be serving as the team chairman for the 21st Games in 2022. Thanks again for joining us tonight. And Mike and Sal, please take it away.
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate it, and I appreciate everybody coming. Obviously, we have a great guest today that we're speaking with in Sal Litvak. It's a tremendous honor. Would like to say thank you for everything you've done for the Jewish community, and you have a wonderful story to tell today, which is exciting. I've heard a little bit, but look forward to learning more. Obviously, two-time Maccabi participant, once in Israel in 1985 as a rower during your collegiate rowing days, and then a few years later, back in your home country in the Pan American Games in 2015. So it'll be a great story. We'll talk a little bit about your education background. We'll talk a little bit about your Jewish journey and, really what you've created today and impacting so many lives, both Jewish and not, locally and globally. So thanks for joining us, Sal.
Honored to be here. Thanks for having me, Mike and Steve.
Great. Well, I think, Sal, it would probably be best if we started with a little bit of background, where you were from, where you grew up, and then we can get into a little bit about your education.
Sure. So I'm a Jutino. I was born in Santiago, Chile in 1965, came to the United States when I was 5 years old and grew up in the New York area. Went to college up in Boston, then a few more years in New York, and made my way west to LA, where I've been ever since.
That's great to hear, and he's being very humble with his education. He has a law degree, a film degree, and a degree from Harvard in English, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
Great. And you spent most of your childhood growing up in New York City, is that right?
Outside the city, maybe some people here are familiar with New City, New York, up in Rockland County. I guess it used to be across the Tappan Zee Bridge. I hear that bridge has been replaced. But yeah, about an hour outside of the city, nice suburb, which has changed a lot since I grew up there. Back then, there were even a few farms and horses out in that area, but it's all big tract developments now.
Well, that's great. Well, can you talk a little bit more about your education? Obviously, you've spent a lot of your life in the world of learning, and now you're in the world of teaching and spreading a message. But just to dive back a little bit in the beginning of your lifetime, can you talk about the meaning of education and what it played in your life?
I think it may be a familiar story for Jewish immigrants. I mean, my parents put a big premium on education. When we got to the United States, I was 5 years old, and they said, well, you're going to go to Harvard and be a doctor. Being 5 years old, I said, okay. Yeah. And that just became the plan. But it's real understandable. As good Jews, we've been chased out of countries all over the world. And the education is the asset that is always portable. On my mother's side, she lost her father in a concentration camp. He was murdered at Dachau. My mother, as a baby, was carried through a concentration camp, Terezin, by my grandmother. An incredible story to keep an infant alive under such conditions. And then my grandmother never remarried, and she just put all of her energy into her one daughter. It was very important to her that my mom got a big education, and she did. They made their way to Chile, where a Hungarian relative had sort of paved the way and become a businessman over there. And actually, he ended up doing very well in Chile and became the founder of La Dehesa, the golf club that hosted the 2015 Maccabi, the Pan Am Games in Chile. That club was created by my uncle. So that was pretty cool. And then on my father's side, I mean, I was born in Chile. My father was born in Chile, and my grandfather was born in Chile. My great-grandfather came from Ukraine about 1905. was just like a peddler and started some kind of a business in Chile and had 9 kids. And again, everybody, got educated and went into business and did well. And so that idea that you have to have, a good education and a portable profession, it was just so ingrained in my family. And certainly that became the plan when we got to the United States. So, I didn't know why Harvard was so great or why I had to go there, but it was the school they heard of when we got there. And it just became the target. And, I was fortunate. I enjoy school. I enjoy learning. And so I was able to do well in terms of getting the grades and the test scores and whatnot. But I think what also really helped me to get there was the sports. I was never great at baseball or basketball or any of the sports that make kids popular in school. But I was into, working hard and doing something interesting. And so I actually got into cycling when I was an early teenager and, just got really into it. I enjoyed the independence and freedom of cycling for miles away from my house, even before I had a driver's license. And then I ended up competing, and I was actually the New York State cycling champion on track in the early 1980s. And that's what I wrote my essay about. So it certainly helped me to get to Harvard. And then when I was at Harvard, obviously it's a very intellectual atmosphere, but it's an incredibly eclectic and interesting atmosphere of people there. And, I just made lifelong friends, and it's been fantastic. But also on the sports front, the kind of endurance and rhythm and breathing that I enjoyed in cycling, I found in rowing. And that just, that there were a lot of guys who were on the team who had rowed at prep schools. I just went to public school. I never saw a rowing shell. I don't even think I heard of rowing, except as some, Ivy League preppy thing to do. Certainly I'd never seen it, didn't know what it was. But there were a lot of guys like that, freshman week at school. And we went out for the rowing team. And, there were just tons of guys that first week. I think there were 120 freshmen who went out for it. And by the end of freshman year, there were 32 of us. And by the end of senior year, I don't know how many made it all the way through, maybe a dozen, a little more.
But, well, it's a wonderful segue, and it talks a lot about, balance, and you found a great balance and you had a great root system to teach you about, the foundation of education. And at the same time, transitioning into, finding a sport that worked for you in rowing. And I guess that's a great segue into, the next topic. As a Harvard rower, in 1985, you were in an elite shape to go compete in the Maccabi games. And it'd be interesting to hear or share with the listeners here today a little bit about when you heard about Maccabi and really making that journey over there and what that was like for you.
You told me you were going to ask that question, and I really tried to remember how I first heard about it. And I don't know. I think I saw that Robert Zaft might be on this call, and he was a teammate in 1985. There he is. And maybe he'll write in the comments if you can remember where we first heard about it. But it came on our radar, and so there was a tryout, and we went to Philadelphia for it, and rode with some guys from Penn. And there we are. And there's Robert in the hat. I'm in that bandana. And the tryouts were a lot of fun. I mean, rowing was so, how do I put it? It really was, at least for me, it was the college experience. I mean, I was an English major, and I learned a lot and made great friends and, had a lot of different kinds of experiences. But rowing was a year-round, all-consuming sport. And I remember that we had very little respect for the fitness levels of anybody else except the swimmers. The swimmers worked even harder than us. But we just rode many hours every day, all year long, consuming thousands of calories. And then when we heard there was, a way that you could row for our country, represent Team USA, in Israel, which is, I'd never been to Israel. I had family in Israel. I had an uncle and some cousins in Israel, but I had never been there and hadn't seen them since we left Chile. And so it was a very exciting opportunity. And when I made the team, I mean, I was thrilled. It was great.
Yeah.
So then we had, we had a training period before we actually went. And, it must be the same thing for lots of other teams, unlike, say, the individual sports. But rowing especially, you need that synchronicity with the other guys to make the boat move at all. And we had to get that together really fast. But it was a great bunch of guys, and we found our rhythm. And then I remember that we had I don't know if it's still that way, but we had our own 747 jumbo jet for Team USA leaving from JFK.
Yeah.
And what a party that was.
Well, it's nice to know that people have had similar experiences for many years and will happen for many years to come. So we appreciate you sharing that. There's probably many fond memories of your teammates that are listening or will listen. And, whether it's golf or rowing or whatever other sport that we compete at over there, it's making memories for many generations to come, which is exciting.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that this is a good segue into, your Jewish journey. Obviously, the Accidental Talmudist is something that has been a new birth, and it wasn't an overnight success, as some may say, but there was a journey behind that. And maybe you can share with everybody a little bit about, your Jewish journey.
Yes. So when we got to New City, we lived in the city for a few years, and then we moved out to New City when I was in third grade. My parents signed me up for Hebrew school at a local conservative synagogue. Mm-hmm. And I did that until I had my bar mitzvah. And what can I say? I found the whole thing kind of boring and uninspiring. And once I had my bar mitzvah, I was really happy because I was done. And it's tragic, really, because I was always spiritual. I always instinctively believed in God. And I was very into science fiction and the idea that, this whole universe worth of stuff would have been created, randomly for no reason, just pop into existence out of nothing, randomly. It made no sense to me at all. So I always felt that the universe was created, the creatures were created, the creator must have an interest in the creatures, I have an interest in him. And I would just pursue all kinds of activities that to me were spiritual and mystical. And it's sad that I didn't associate Judaism with that seeking a connection with the Creator. Mm-hmm. And so, I didn't go to other religions and stuff, but the rowing has a pseudo-mystical quality, especially on certain days, now and then, when you achieve something called swing in the boat, which is just this perfect synchronicity of breath and timing and everything. But I was also into meditation and drumming and Grateful Dead shows. Eventually I got into martial arts. And these are all things often having to do with the breath. But that for me was some kind of an access to to that higher level. I always felt that there was some kind of hidden meaning to life, and I wanted to discover it. So I was just involved in all those other things. Eventually, I made my way out to LA. I was going to film school, and it was during film school that I got the call from my parents, come home. My grandmother lay dying. So I was always very, very close to her. I mentioned her before. Her name was Magda. She was Hungarian. Her husband was Hungarian. He had a chance to leave Hungary. She wanted to leave Hungary during the 30s and move to a place that was much safer for the Jews, which at that time was Iran. But he said, I'm a Hungarian, this is my country. I would never leave here. So they stayed, and it ended up very bad. And, she and my mother, as an infant, my mother and my grandmother survived. My grandmother lost her husband, and she was always waiting to be reunited with him. In those displaced person camps, the DP camps, she was so happy when people would start over again and get married and form new families, all the people that had lost spouses and, God forbid, children. But for her, there was only her husband, Imre. So she was waiting to be reunited with him. 53 years later, I was at her bedside. She was 89 years old. She lay dying. And my mother was there. My brother and I were there. There's just the two of us. And she had always been so kind and sweet and funny. And we were holding her hand and telling her, you know, it's okay. It's okay. We love you so much. You're going to a good place. And then she took her last breath. And if you've ever seen someone take their last breath, you know, like when that person has died. And my mother was weeping, my brother was weeping, and something pulled my attention away from her, like in the bed here, to the middle of the room. And it was like the air in the room began to shimmer, and then something opened. It was almost like looking into a chandelier, and there's all like the colors of crystal. And then something opened in the midst of that, and I saw her, and she was moving away from me and towards something. And it was my grandmother's. I always knew her, not sick with cancer, but just this like wonderful lady. And she was moving away from me and towards something, and then I saw she was moving towards someone. And then I recognized from photographs that were in our house, my grandfather. And I thought, oh my gosh, she's been waiting for this moment her whole life. She's going to be reunited with her Bashir, her soulmate. And she didn't want to go. She was reluctant. And I was like, why doesn't she want to go? And then I got it, like, he's still young. Like the last time they were together in 1944, and she's an older lady. And she's like embarrassed. He's not going to want me. And he reached out to her and pulled her to him. And they embraced, and then it got brighter. And then she was young again, like the last time they'd been together. And then there was like, they were like kissing, and it was like the end of a Hollywood movie. Only Hollywood could never get such a moment correct. It was so much bigger and brighter and more love-drenched and spiritual than that. And then it got really bright, and then they were gone. And, you know, I was just stunned and crying, but with a huge smile on my face. I couldn't believe that with her last moments in this world, she had, given me a glimpse into that other world. So when I got back to LA, I wanted to honor her. And I didn't know what else to do, so I went to a big synagogue like the kind I grew up in to say Kaddish. And the rabbi that day was gifted, a great teacher. He's a pretty famous rabbi, actually. And I thought, this thing that I've been looking for in all these other places, maybe I should try my own backyard. And I started going to synagogue, and I started taking classes. And we're very rich in LA in terms of gifted teachers of Judaism and Jewish wisdom. There are a lot of great rabbis around here. And I started taking classes, various kinds, various places. And, sooner or later, every rabbi will mention the Talmud. And I would always think, well, this Talmud, I don't really know what it is, but it's clearly full of wisdom. I would like to read it, but apparently if you didn't go to yeshiva and get a rabbinical degree, it's incomprehensible and beyond me. So there's nothing I could do about it. Mm-hmm. So as I got kind of more into a Jewish community, and at this point I met Nina, who became my wife. We were enjoying becoming part of a Jewish community. At that point, we were going to kind of an odd shul that I would call Reform Hasidic here in LA. A lot of celebrities there. The rabbi teaches sort of spiritual psychology in addition to Hasidus, and all very interesting. And everyone mentioning the Talmud, but I guess I can't read that. And whenever I would go to this Jewish bookstore called the Mitzvah Store on Pico Boulevard, so I would see all those volumes of Talmud. And, for people who are of a certain age, you remember the Encyclopedia Britannica. So the Encyclopedia Britannica is 23 big, thick volumes that contain the wisdom of humanity. Mm-hmm. The Talmud, published by Art Scroll, contains the wisdom of the Jews, and it's 73 volumes. So it's really imposing. And every time I would walk by there, if I was there to get a kippah or a prayer book or a gift for somebody, I would look at all those shelves and it's like, yeah, I'd love to read that. Wouldn't know where to begin. And I also had a feeling like I'm not allowed. I'd heard that, for Kabbalah, you're supposed to be 40. I wasn't 40 yet. But maybe it's similar. You're not the right age, or maybe you have to be a rabbi. I just thought I wasn't allowed. So repeat a dozen times. Finally, one time I'm in that store. It was 2005. And I went through that same thought process, started to walk away, and something stopped me. And I said, this is ridiculous. I was an English major at Harvard. My house is full of books. Why am I backing down from books? There must be a book one of the Talmud. I'm just going to get that and see what it's like. So I figured out that book one of the Talmud is brachas. I found the brachas. I took it to the counter, and the kid at the register said, oh, you're doing Daf Yomi. So I said, what's Daf Yomi? And he went like this. As if to say, are you kidding me? And I thought, oh man, Daf Yomi must be a code. If you don't know the code, you're not allowed to read the book. Now he's got to get rid of me without embarrassing me. This is so awkward. How do I get out of here? And he said, Daf Yomi is a program where people around the world read the entire Talmud on the same schedule, 1 page per day. Daf Yomi, page of the day. On that schedule, it takes 7.5 years to read the whole Talmud. And today is day 1 of that schedule. Wow. So if we just unpack that for a second, I happened to buy book 1 of the Talmud on day 1 of a 7.5 year cycle. The odds against that are 2,711 to 1. So I said, okay, God, I get the message. I guess I'm doing Daf Yomi. Now, most Jews, who are not from that real Orthodox yeshivish world have never heard of Daf Yomi, like me, and certainly wouldn't embark on it. The people who do embark on Daf Yomi come from that world, and most of them who set out on that journey give it up because it's such a big commitment. I mean, a page doesn't sound like a lot, but it's like a page of the densest kind of text. It actually works out to 10 pages per day of the art scroll, elucidated Talmud. It's about an hour a day just to read it, and get some basic understanding of it. And it's an hour a day, every day. Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, your wedding, you're directing a movie, you're on vacation, every day, no matter what, for 7.5 years. And that's why most people give up. But I felt like God put the book in my hand, so I stayed with it. In the beginning, it was really hard making heads or tails of it. I thought I heard you shouldn't be learning alone, so I tried going to a class. Classes in Daf Yomi come in 3 varieties, Yiddish, English, or Hebrew. So I was like, okay, I'm going to English. But the rabbi came in, and every other word from his mouth was either in Hebrew or Aramaic. It's jargon. In the same way that doctors, when they speak to each other, we won't catch so much of it because of their jargon. Yeshivish jargon for the Talmud is extensive, and I had no idea what he was saying. So, Art Scroll is not just a translation, it's an elucidation. It adds tons of text as if a great rabbi is explaining it to you in very clear English. Mm-hmm. So I did that on my own for the next 3 years. After 3 years, I tried going to a class again. It was the same thing, it was all jargon, and now I could follow it. That was very inspiring for me. I continued the way, and I finished what's called Completing Shas. I completed that journey in 2012. I started blogging about it. We called it the Accidental Talmudist. It was a cover story in the Jewish Journal and then a blog. If you have a blog, you should have a Facebook page. And the Facebook page really took off, just sharing different types of Jewish wisdom, long form, short form, video, eventually live video, every day on Facebook. And this thing just grew and grew. And so today we have over 1 million followers around the world. I'm now teaching Daf Yomi. The new cycle began in January. So I teach a daily class. Now I've set out to not only read every page a day for 7.5 years, but to teach it. So now it's like a 3-hour-a-day commitment for 7.5 years. And I really hope God will give me the strength to complete it. But 6 months in, it's going strong. So that's what's going on.
Well, it's a wonderful journey, and I'm sure everybody is as inspired as I was when I first started. And it's not a coincidence. This is quite a story, and it's heartwarming, really. And I think what many people don't know, what you shared with me and Steve earlier this week, is that you were on the fence about another 7.5 year commitment and teaching it to your 7.5 million followers, but
1 million.
1 million, excuse me, 7.5 years.
Yeah.
And you said, listen, I'm going to take this investment on. I'm going to figure it out. And you've done that.
So far, so good. Yeah, the first day I was so ambivalent about doing it. I just turned on my phone and did it. You know, I studied the page, I learned it, I taught it. People seemed to like it. And so I kept going. And then over the last 6 months, it's evolved. I mean, technically, now it's working a lot better. It's going out on Facebook and YouTube, and it's all stored. You can learn a lot about me and what I do and see. The show is called AT Daily, and you can learn more about it at accidentaltalmudist.org.
And in fairness, in my position, I was in a similar, at your age, we were in similar positions. And so this week I went on your Facebook page and I watched a video, and it's not an hour, it's not an hour and a half. It is a condensed version with your thoughts, and you're bringing it into, you know, current day, which is very helpful for not me, but the entire community to understand. And it's not overwhelming. It's a very nice way. So I know that, you know, you shared some statistics with us about the impact that it's having not only locally, but globally. And if you wouldn't mind sharing just a little bit about the percentage of your following that is Jewish, and then maybe the ones that are not, and some of the territories that have surprised you.
Yeah, it's been so interesting. So, you know, who is interested in Jewish wisdom? You would think it's Jews. But from what we've seen of our 1 million followers, and I say our and we because my wife Nina and I do this together. I couldn't do anything that I do without her. It's a very important partnership. We share everything and do all the work together. And we've been surprised to learn that Facebook doesn't provide hard data on this, but we've gotten to know our audience pretty well, and it's pretty clear that a little more than half are not Jewish. There's a lot of Christians who are interested because Jesus was Jewish. There's a lot of Muslims who are interested. We have big following in Egypt, in Pakistan, in Bangladesh, in Nigeria. We have a lot of followers in India. So they're neither Muslim nor Christian. You know, there's a lot of beautiful religions in India, and people are interested to learn about ours. I wouldn't say it's an interfaith effort, but I would say that it was very important to me because of the experiences that I had kind of in my journey, and how difficult it was to connect and to learn and to make it accessible. So everything that I teach, I don't dumb it down at all, but I make it accessible. Mm-hmm. So as you say, I sum that day's page up into like a 30 to 45 minute presentation. I just pick crucial highlights that make sense to teach. I don't teach the entire page. That's a different undertaking. I teach what's beautiful and important on each page, and then give everybody the background that they need to understand those concepts. And I do it in English. And I actually just got a letter today from a guy in Fredericksburg, Virginia, who had tried to do Daf Yomi a couple times, but ran into that same hurdle. When I started, there weren't these online resources. Now there are. You can hear classes taught by a great yeshivish rabbi teaching the entire Daf every day. But if you're not familiar with all those ideas and you didn't grow up in it, it's almost impossible. And so he had given up on it until he found me, and now he's able to do the Daf, even though he was already a pretty religious guy. So that's been, we're very grateful that we can provide that service.
Oh, it's wonderful. Well, we had a question come in from one of the listeners saying, it's Shane Carr reached out, you have a 1 million followers. Do you ever find yourself at a loss for how to respond?
Sure, definitely. As you can hear, I'm a yacker. I mean, I'm happy to talk. I'm happy to talk to people. I've always been intrigued by people, and I love talking to people and learning about their journey and sharing mine. But sometimes we get, really intense personal questions. I always remind people I'm not a rabbi. I have a little bit of learning under my belt. But, it's not like I was ever educated to be a counselor for people, certainly not a therapist. But people open up to me all the time. So, I always preface everything I say with, look, I'm not qualified to tell you anything. Just as a fellow Jew or as a fellow human being, this is what I hear you saying, and this is what it makes me think. But there's just a lot of people out there who are hurting for different reasons. A lot of people who are really curious and seeking for different reasons. And it is a really large community, and we try to answer every query. It's not always possible.
Yeah. And I think, a few more questions, and then it seems like we're getting some in the chat as well, Steve, so we can field those in a second. But, part of the Accidental Talmudist is, this saying, wisdom for all. And it's a beautiful, beautiful saying and a beautiful way of, voicing really what identifies with the Accidental Talmudist. So would you mind, breaking that down and elaborating a little bit more on what you mean by wisdom for all?
The Jewish people, we've been persecuted so hard and so long and in so many places that, there's almost a default stance, particularly before Israel was created, of just, shuffling along with our head down and trying not to attract too much attention, because too much attention invariably becomes negative attention.
Yeah.
And my father actually talked about, how, he was only born in 43, but, in 48, 5 years later, and as Israel became more of a thing, it changed his life as a Jew in Chile, to know that there is a Jewish nation, and to be proud. And he got in fights. I mean, he ran into real anti-Semitism in Chile, and he ended up being a rugby player. I mean, he's not anyone to be bullied. But that idea that so often we would keep our noses down meant that this incredibly beautiful and long and deep wisdom tradition. I mean, look, we're an intelligent people who prize education. That's been our portable asset for thousands of years. And so if you've got the best and brightest of a people that prizes education and intelligence, adding their wisdom to the pool of wisdom for 3,000 years, at its core is the Torah, right? But the idea is God created this world for a reason. He sent all of us souls into it with a mission, and we're here for a reason, and we have to figure out what that reason is and do our best to fulfill it. So that's the core of the wisdom. So for thousands of years, the best and brightest adding to that pool of wisdom, it's an incredible, incredible reservoir of wisdom. Now, are we nurturing that just for ourselves, sort of guarding that light in our closet? No, I mean, we were told, be a light unto the nations. So when it's safe to do so, and in many ways it is now, there's rising anti-Semitism, there's danger in the world, but it's never really been so good for the Jews as it is now in America, I would say. Historically speaking. But now that we have that opportunity, we got to let that light shine, because we've been nurturing that wisdom on behalf not just of the Jews, but of humanity. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot that people can learn from it that is useful to them and helps them in their journey as souls in this world. And clearly it's striking a chord, because all these people have come to learn from our community, even if they're not Jewish.
Well, it's you're certainly helping spread the wisdom, and you're doing your part. So on behalf of everybody, thank you for that. I would like to kind of bring the conversation back to the Maccabi Games, the Pan American Games. Obviously, I learned something new this evening, that your family was a part of the construction of the course that you played on, starting in '85 and now in 2015, with a new understanding of Judaism. You compete again in the Maccabi Games. And I'm wondering if you can share with us a little bit about that experience, playing with your family member, and what it meant to compete on the golf course.
Yeah, my cousin Ricardo Litvak was there on the team with me. I don't know if he's on the call now. I think I see his daughter Erica's on it. There he is. Ricky's in the front row, and I'm up there on the left. And it was amazing. We left Chile, most of the family, around 1970, when the politics really changed. And it was, there was a lot of difficulties and challenges about that, starting over in a new country. Our family had sort of come some way, from 1905 until 1970. And then we started over again when we came to the United States. Ricky started over again in Canada, and then moved to the States after college. And, and to go back there was amazing. To see our family, as a member of Team USA was amazing. But for me, to be back on a Maccabi team 30 years later, after doing it, as a rower in '85, I was just on cloud nine the whole 2 weeks we were there. It was a joy. Everything about it was a joy. The opening ceremony, was great. Meeting athletes from all those countries. This time I remembered that I was going to be trading stuff. I was prepared with the T-shirts and pins and shorts and sweats and all that stuff. But I kept my Team USA sweat jacket because I remember regretting that I traded that one away in '85.
No, that's great. And I think that a lot of people share that experience, and, having come back to it, a little later in your life, and having had, a new understanding of, the Jewish culture, but getting a lot of the same, great things that Maccabi USA and, the Maccabi World Union put together to offer that experience is exceptional. And you're experiencing it 30 years later with family members in a country that you were from. So truly a success story in terms of the Maccabi world.
Oh yeah. I'm very grateful to the whole Maccabi enterprise. I think I'm very grateful that it was created and that it's been nurtured by you and everybody who's involved in making it the successful organization that it is. Because it is not easy. I know that it is not easy, and thank God it exists and is flourishing.
Yeah, and I think that one more important thing, and then we'll open it up to a couple of questions, Steve, that maybe you can field. But you mentioned having a desire to go back and play in Israel. Can you talk a little bit about your desire to go back and what it would be to compete over there again?
Yeah, I really want to go. I went with my family actually last summer. So I've been to Israel a few times since then. Sort of as my Jewish journey got deeper and deeper, and my wife also went. We went separately on ACE trips. I went there with my first film. I'm also a film director. We haven't talked about that, but I went there with my film, When Do We Eat? If you guys want to see a really funny Jewish movie set at a pretty raucous Passover Seder, see When Do We Eat? And it played at the Jerusalem Film Festival, so I was there for that. But this last time that I went last year with my family, I played the course. What is it called again? The
Caesarea Golf Club. Yeah.
And I played it with my son, and so that was great. And I would just love to make the squad. My golf has got to improve if I'm going to make the Masters team at the World Games. But I hope my game gets good enough and I can make the squad.
Well, it's nice to hear such passion, and there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes from the team in Philadelphia and beyond. And it's nice to hear that people feel the same way we feel, and going out to the qualifier, having that experience, and taking the 2 or 3 weeks and being allowed to compete with your fellow Jews from all over the world, 80 different countries when I went in 2017. It's truly moving. So it's nice to know that that's a feeling that's felt for everybody, which is great.
And I think these days there's so much talk about diversity, and I think a lot of non-Jews would sort of lump us all into one, look, the way Jews look. You go to the Maccabi games and you see right away
yeah.
that Jews from around the world are as diverse as any other group. It's amazing,
Yeah. And I think that's a great way to kind of piece it all together, is that there is a lot of diversity within the Jewish community. One thing we didn't talk on was, your other, your commitments to your other fields in both the film world and the law. I don't know if you want to spend a second speaking about those, but it's up to you.
Well, I'll just mention briefly that, my parents told me to be a doctor. I didn't want to be a doctor, so of course I had to go to law school. I didn't really want to be a lawyer, but I got the law degree. I passed the bar. I worked for a couple of years in New York City, and then I made my way out to California. I went to UCLA Film School, and it was nice when you go to law school, there's a job waiting for you at a good firm. When you go to film school, you're qualified to direct a movie or fetch coffee. And it's hard to get a job fetching coffee, let alone making a movie. So I think that experiences like rowing, like being a Maccabi athlete, like being a disciplined Jew who studies and davens every day, just gave me the discipline to write the screenplays and raise the money and eventually get a movie made and then another movie made. So it's certainly not easy to write and direct movies in Hollywood, but thank God we've been able to do that. And we've, because of Accidental Talmudist, I'm also the executive director of a 501c3, and as you've heard, it's an incredibly time-consuming gig. But we are writing our next picture, and at some point, in the not too distant future, we look forward to producing that.
Well, that's great, and I guess this can be my last question, and then we'll go to the Q&A and see, what the listeners also have to ask you. But what's next? What's on Sal's radar screen? It sounds like there's another production in the works, but you've obviously you've got a lot of aspirations, so would love to hear them.
Well, I think we've covered them. I want to make that movie. That's a murder mystery called Guns and Moses. So look for that in the next few years. I want to, I pray that God will give me the strength and the diligence to complete this ambition of teaching the Talmud over the next 7 years. I think today is going to be episode like 171 straight days. That means I have to learn the page, then I have to prepare to teach the page, then I teach the page live online, then I digest the page and get it ready so that it's available online. And I'm going to have to find a way to keep doing that. I have a daughter who is going to be a high school senior and a son who's a rising sophomore. So, I hope I can be there for them the way that my parents were there for me. And and in the midst of all of that, I can make the Masters golf squad for the 2022 games. I guess they've been postponed a year. Then Olive.
Well, clear the schedule. Sounds like a busy one, but no, that's great. I think we have a couple of questions that came in, and everybody listening, please feel free to type a question for Sal into the chat box. One of the questions asked by Victor, we were talking about Daf Yomi. I believe this is what it's referencing to, but can you join in the middle of the program?
Yes, absolutely. The nature of the Talmud, by the way, I'm writing a book. So yeah, I'm writing a book about my journey.
Add it to the calendar.
Add that to the calendar. And I was just writing actually about this, that like you would think, okay, that a series of books that, it's essentially one work, 73 volumes long. So you would think when you jump into it in the first few pages, maybe the first volume or two would sort of act like an introduction, just sort of setting up the journey and what it's going to be like. But no, when you embark on the sea of Talmud, you get whipped into a storm and a raging sea immediately. And it's just crazy digressions all over the place. And it really doesn't matter whether you start at the beginning or, like on the current cycle where we are right now. I think today I'm teaching, I think it's page 111 in Tractate Shabbos. And you can really jump in anywhere and just start learning. My show is a great entry point. But, anytime you're learning, it's good, right? Because when we pray, we're talking to God. When we're learning, God is talking to us. God is the strong and silent type, and he often keeps his peace when we're praying and otherwise talking to him. But when we're learning, we see that he has put a lot of conversation into the world for us to hear. And there's just so much to learn. And, not every day is equally accessible or exciting or interesting. Sometimes in the Talmud, you spend weeks learning complicated technical laws, but then the digression will be out of nowhere and go into incredibly beautiful parables and and Proverbs and just, deep wisdom teachings about marriage, about medicine, about friendship, about prosperity. You never know what to expect on any given page. So yeah, jump in anytime.
That's great. We had an interesting question come in. How has your journey, this very fascinating journey, how's it affected your daily life?
Well, I have a good buddy. He was actually a coxswain on the rowing team in college. And so we've been good friends for a very long time. And he came with me to the Siyum in 2012. So the Siyum is the completion. Whenever we study a Jewish text, when we complete it, we can make a Siyum. But when you complete Daf Yomi, when the whole cycle renews, at the end of every 7.5 years, there's massive celebrations. So we just had one in January, and they had it at Giant Stadium. That was a lot more challenging than the one in August in 2012. Giant Stadium in August is a lot more inviting than in January. But my buddy said to me, you've changed a lot. And I thought I was older, but I said, what do you mean? Because I'll be honest, there were times my first trip through from 2005 to 2012 where I almost wondered, has this become an ego thing that I just want to finish it? So I can say I finished it. Prior to that, my Jewish journey began in 97, right? So for like another 7.5 years, I was really getting into prayer and praying every day and sort of getting close to God that way. And once I started doing Daf Yomi, there was less time available for prayer. And so I thought, am I really moving forward spiritually, or maybe I'm slipping back a little bit? And it was my friend who said, no, Sal, you've changed, And I'd like to think I'm still the same fun-loving guy that I always was. But when you're reading about refining character in so many different ways constantly, it has to have an effect on you. Mm-hmm. And I certainly missed the mark. Like any human being, I make mistakes. But I try to hold myself up to a higher standard now, and and that has an effect on relationships that's been positive.
That's great.
And then I would also say, when we first reconnected, we were pretty casual about Judaism, just kind of adopting practices that appeal to us as we went along. But over time, definitely our religiosity has increased, and we're Shomer Shabbos Torah Jews now.
Yeah.
So that's also been a change.
That's great. Well, we got time for about one or two more questions. One that came in was, have you learned Hebrew or Yiddish, and has that helped in your understanding of the Talmud?
I wish I knew Yiddish. It's such a great language and so funny. I picked up some phrases here and there, but not really. Hebrew, I can't say that I speak Hebrew. But when I'm reading, when I'm praying, my vocabulary has gotten much bigger. And that's important because so much of it's about studying text, and you really have to get into the Hebrew to get the full depth of it. I know I'm still missing a lot because my Hebrew is weak compared to somebody who's a lifelong learner. I'm very happy that we're able to give our kids that gift. They've had a Jewish education all their lives. They speak Hebrew. They're comfortable in it. So I wish my Hebrew was better, but I certainly learned a lot more than when I started.
That's great. And the last question is one that I actually often ask of people, and you've accomplished a tremendous amount. You're continuing to impact people all over the world. And for people looking to make a similar impact, or, find that value that you've really found or are finding, if you were to give one piece of advice, to the listeners, to me, to everyone, what would that piece of advice be?
I would, and I say this a lot to our community, you have to keep asking, what is my mission? 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 Like, you really have to keep asking that question. Mm-hmm. Your mission is something like the contribution that only you can make. Now, it doesn't mean you have to do a unique thing. You have to be an artist who paints something that's never been painted before. There's a contribution that only you can make in every field, or in every field that appeals to you. But if you keep asking the question, God, why did you send me here? God, what is my mission? What is my mission? What can only I do? What is the help that only I can provide? What is the gift that only I can give? What is the achievement? What is the accomplishment? To ask that question is to embark on the journey. And if you keep asking it, you'll get the answer. I think that most people don't ask the question. And a writer that I was fond of in college, D.H. Lawrence, wrote this little novella called The Virgin and the Gypsy. I haven't read it since college, but I remember this line. And he said that most people sit in a jail cell with the key to the cell on a chain around their neck where it dangles inert. We all have the key that unlocks, a very bright future. And we just don't use it. So, it's a mystery to know. Some people know exactly why they're here and what they're meant to do, and God bless them. For a lot of us, we're just kind of on autopilot, and we just go along with the day and the week and the year. But if we keep asking that question, what is my mission? What is my mission? What is my mission? Answers will come, self-analysis will come, help will come, allies will come, strength will come. So it's about asking the question.
Well, this has been extremely informative for me. I think everybody that joined us this evening also enjoyed the conversation based on the chat box that I'm reading. And, we can't thank you enough for doing this. Thank you, Maccabi, for setting this up. And Steve, obviously, organizing this. So, Sal, your time is extremely valuable. I look forward to following along with.
Let me just say that if anybody has further questions, wants to continue the conversation, or get to know more about Accidental Talmudist and what we do, it's Accidental Talmudist on Facebook, or just come to our website. That's the easiest way to get a hold of us, accidentaltalmudist.org. Very easy to find us.
That's wonderful. Well, I think that does it. Steve, unless you have any other closing remarks, we got to thank Sal over and over again.
You nailed it right there. We want to give thanks to you, Mike. You did an amazing job moderating. Thank you so much for joining us and taking the time and for your support. But Sal, this was a pleasure. This was an honor. We're so happy to have you on and be a part of our family and our community. We wish you the best of luck with everything that you're working on, whether it's Accidental Talmudist, screenwriting, movie directing, producing, everything that you're working on. And best of luck with your golf and trying out for the team in 2022. We'll keep you posted on the tryouts. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. Appreciate it. Our next Maccabi at Home session is next Tuesday evening at 8 p.m. Eastern. We're going to be highlighting a few members of our community who are doing amazing work with their local environment.
All the best, everybody. Great to see you. Thanks for coming.